Some call me the poor old woman, and there are some that call me Kathleen, the daughter of Hurrah. There have been many songs made for me. I heard one on the wind this morning. Do not make a great keening when the graves have been dug tomorrow. Do not give money for prayers for the dead that shall die tomorrow. They will have no need of prayers. They will have no need of prayers. It is a hard service they take that help me. Many that are red-cheeked now will be pale-cheeked. Many that have been free to walk the hills and the bogs and the rushes will be sent to walk hard streets in far countries. Many a child will be born, and there will be no father at his christening. They that had red cheeks will be pale-cheeked for my sake, and all that they will think they are well paid. They shall be remembered forever. They shall be alive forever. They shall be speaking forever. The people shall hear them forever.
Did that play of mine send out certain men the English shot?
Maybe it did. Maybe not. Certain men.
They were shot anyway.
At dawn. Stonebreaker's Yard. Kilmainham Jail.
One dawn after another. 14 of them.
Between the 3rd and 12th of May 1916. 14 executions. History, that is.
May 3.
Pearse, MacDonagh, Clark.
May 4.
Plunkett, Daly, O'Hanrahan, Willie Pearse.
May 5.
Major John McBride.
May 8.
Kemp, Mallon, Houston, Con Colbert.
May 12.
Sean McDermott.
And James Connolly.
Wounded, dying, strapped to a chair.
It is a hard service they take that help me.
Isn't it just? But brave men, the lot of them, no question, in their own way.
Oh, words lightly spoken, said Pearse to Connolly. Maybe a breath of politic words has withered our rose tree, or maybe but a wind that blows across the bitter sea.
It needs to be but water, James Connolly replied, to make the green come out again and spread on every side, and shake the blossom from the bud, to be the garden's pride.
But where shall we draw water, said Pearse to Connolly, when all the wells are parched away? Oh, plain as plain can be, there's nothing but our own red blood can make a right rose tree. But beyond those deaths, many others, rebels, soldiers, police, civilians, children.
485 men, women and children were killed during or as a direct result of the 1916 rebellion. One half of the dead were civilians. Over a fifth of those civilians were children under 16. A quarter of those killed were British Army soldiers, some of them Irishmen. 13 policemen killed, all Irishmen. In the rebel forces, 58 killed, including one woman.
Numbers, yes, statistics.
But everyone with a name, an address, a family, a history.
The greatest number, civilians and children.
The Republic was born from their sacrifice too, wasn't it? What is it they call it nowadays?
Collateral damage.
Collateral damage. Isn't language lovely? Sugarcoating things like that. But no sugarcoating the reality.
The man had his brains blown into the roadway. I'd seen a young girl run into the road and pick up his cap and scrape the brains into it. Then didn't she cover this with a little straw and carry the hat, pious-like, to the hospital, so the brains might be buried with the body?
Kids too. Boys, girls, babies. Little Sean Foster was killed on Easter Monday. He was 2 years old.
Christopher Andrews was 14. I knew his sister. He was shot dead on Mount Street Bridge, and him giving a drink of water to a wounded soldier.
Animals too, from ordinary pets to the Lancers' horses, rotting in front of the GPO for days.
There isn't a cat or dog left alive in Camden Street. Lying stiff out on the roads there or up on the roofs. There's a lot of women who'll be sorry for this war, and their pets killed on them.
So much for all that then.
But we should go back, shouldn't we? Back to the start. Back to...
history.
Yes, history.
Home rule.
Yes, home rule.
To govern ourselves.
Yes.
Wanted, denied, wanted again.
All those revolutions.
Too many to go into now.
One a generation.
For a few hundred years.
1641.
1689.
1798.
1803.
1848.
1867.
All fail.
Goes without saying.
Home rule. Always that hope.
That hunger, that thirst. And didn't Parnell himself say in 1893?
Home rule would be the introduction of a system which would remove the rankling sting of suppressed but not extinct enmity between our two islands. Give back to Ireland her nationality, her individual existence, and soothe thereby her wounded pride.
Poets and writers were involved too, of course they were. Sure, didn't Lady Gregory say of all the plays, books and poems they were writing?
We are not working for home rule, we are preparing for it.
And later, after it all happened, didn't Maud Gonne herself say?
Without the inspiration of the literary revival, or the glorification of beauty and heroic virtue, I doubt there would have been an Easter week. There were poets and writers who led Irish youth to die that Ireland might live.
Dreams these were. Dreams and dreamers.
Yes, but as the poet says, in dreams begin responsibilities.
Well, anyway, in 1911, at last, the English government, with the help of John Redmond's Irish party, introduced a Home Rule Bill. Says Redmond,
I pray earnestly that this bill may pass, and that the results of all our councils may be the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honour and happiness of the king, and the public health, peace and tranquillity of the realm.
nice, if a bit old-fashioned. But then, the North.
The North, oh yes.
The North, aye, Ulster, Unionists mostly.
Who for the most part didn't feel the same way. They wished to keep the Union intact.
Understandable, I suppose. Some of it, history, settler people, you see, from way back.
Different tribe, I suppose.
Some of them.
Different religion too.
Some of them.
And certainly not fraterning.
Not exactly.
September 1912, the Ulster Covenant and Declaration.
500,000 Irish men and women signed.
We vow to use all means which may be found necessary to defeat the present conspiracy to set up a Home Rule Parliament in Ireland. Let all 9 counties of Ulster be excluded.
The English Conservative opposition, Bonar Law and Company, was on their side.
We have given a pledge that if Ulster resists, we will support her in her resistance. We intend to keep that pledge.
By 1913, so volunteer armies were all the rage.
Ulster Volunteer Force in the north, the UVF. Irish Volunteer Force in the south, the IVF.
The island ripe for civil war.
Yes, 1913 was a bad year. Strikes, lockouts, police brutality, general disorder. The poet Yeats had his say. Irish values were corrupt, he said. The heroic past was dead.
What needs you being come to sense but fumble in the greasy till and add the halfpence to the pence and prayer to shivering prayer until you've dried the marrow from the bone? For men were born to pray and save. Romantic Ireland's dead and gone, it's with O'Leary in the grave. Was it for this the wild geese spread the grey wing upon every tide? For this that all that blood was shed? For this Edward Fitzgerald died and Robert Emmet and Wolfe Tone? All that delirium of the brave? Romantic Ireland's dead and gone, it's with O'Leary in the grave.
All that delirium of the brave.
But little did he know what was in Ireland's near future.
Or in England's, Europe's, the world's.
With the great clock of history sounding the hours, driving everything on.
On to August 1914 and the Great War to end war.
Bit of a laugh that, to end war. But didn't Home Rule get put on the back burner?
Yes, and John Redmond, right or wrong, who can say, went along with that.
And thinking 'twould help the cause of Home Rule, didn't he encourage the Irish volunteers to join the British Army for the duration of the war?
The interests of Ireland, of the whole of Ireland, are at stake in this war.
Redmond named those who stayed with him the National Volunteers.
Of the 80,000 that enlisted during the first 12 months of the war, half are from Ulster, half from the south. By war's end, over 200,000 Irish people had joined. Men and women from every town and village, north and south.
The poet Francis Ledwidge joined, because, as he said himself, I cannot stand aside while others seek to defend Ireland's freedom. Others had other reasons.
I joined the British Army because she stood between Ireland and an enemy of civilization. In the Dublin Fusiliers I was.
And Northerners, sympathetic to the Home Rule cause, thought joining up would help.
I wanted it. That's the way I joined the Enniskillings. Aren't we all Irishmen?
But Owen MacNeil, Patrick Pearse and others held on to the Irish Volunteers. All joining up there.
And Connie, of course, feared conscription. The horrors of the trenches for the Irish who would be forced to join up. As he said in early 1916 itself,
all those mountains of Irish dead, All those corpses mangled beyond recognition. All those horrors buried in Flanders of the Gallipoli Peninsula. This is what Ireland pays for being part of the British Empire.
He and his comrades were thinking now, you see, beyond home rule.
Thinking to say of a real republic. And of course, they went on drilling. As one Dublin lady said,
scarcely a Sunday passed through the summer or autumn of 1915 that there wasn't a muster of volunteers to spread the gospel of physical force as the only way to win back our country from England. The rebels' poems and songs at those gatherings helped foster a rebel spirit. Thomas Davis's poem, A Nation Once Again, was very popular.
For freedom comes from God's right hand and needs a godly train, and righteous men must make our land a nation once again.
The poems in Irish there were too. This one by Mr. Pearce was very popular with us.
Misha Era, Shiname non Kayak Beara.
I am Ireland, I am older than the old woman of Bear, great my glory, I who bore Cuchulainn the brave, great my shame, my own children who sold their mother, great my pain, those in whom I placed my trust all died, great my sorrow, I am Ireland, I am lonelier than the old woman of Bear.
And so many songs.
I loved this one. Down by the glen side, I met an old woman, a plucking young nettles. She ne'er saw me coming. I listened a while to the song she was humming. Glory, oh, to the bold Fenian men.
And not only poems and songs, speeches too. Here's Pearce in August 1915 at the funeral of the old Fenian O'Donovan Rossa.
Our foes are strong and wise and wary, but they cannot undo the miracles of God. Life springs from death, and from the graves of patriot men and women spring alive nations. The defenders of this realm think they have foreseen everything, but the fools, they have left us our Fenian dead. And while Ireland holds these graves, Ireland unfree shall never be at peace.
I know it all sounds very masculine, and it was, but the women played their part. Sure didn't Connolly himself praise them? Let us not forget the women, says he, who have everywhere stood by us and cheered us on. Indeed they did. And not only cheered them on, joined them. With the suffragettes behind them, they insisted on their equal rights.
It is a curious thing that many men seem unable to believe, that any woman can embrace an ideal, accept it intellectually, feel it as a profound emotion, and then calmly work for its realization. Men give themselves endless pains to prove that everything a woman does, outside nursing babies and washing pots, is a result of being in love with some man, or disappointed in love with some man, or looking for excitement or limelight, or indulging their vanity. Ridiculous. Now, our aim is to advance the cause of Irish liberty and to teach our members first aid, drill, signalling and rifle practice in order to aid the men of Ireland.
Indeed, and more power to them. And when there were over 100 women involved in the rising itself, and on Easter Monday, wouldn't 40 of them be in the GPO with the volunteers, the Citizen Army and the IRB, fighting, says one of them, Min Ryan.
If the men were to die, we would too. That was the way we felt.
And didn't Hannah Sheehy Skeffington herself say?
It is the only instance I know of in history when men fighting for freedom voluntarily included women.
Anyway, by nightfall that Easter Monday, women insurgents would be established in all the major rebel strongholds throughout the city.
Except for one. In Boland's Mill, defying the orders of Pearce and Connolly, de Valera refused to let us women fighters in. But our women fighters in the other rebel garrisons fought alongside the men, or were dispatch carriers between garrisons, and were not confined only to nursing duties or other so-called feminine pursuits, such as making tea and sandwiches for the fighting men.
However, and wherever they served, they would be indispensable.
Helena Maloney,
Madeline French Mullen,
Dr. Kathleen Lynn,
Rose McNamara,
Nurse Elizabeth O'Farrell,
Winnie Carney,
Julia Grennan,
Margaret Skinner,
Linda Cairns McQuinney,
Margaretta Keogh,
killed in action,
and others, many others, men and women of all sorts, all classes, drawn from all the ordinary trades and professions.
poets, teachers, lecturers.
Shopkeepers, secretaries, journalists.
Doctors, actors, writers.
Nurses, labourers, trade unions.
Barmen, tram conductors, dockers.
Printers, corporation clerks, farmers.
Bookkeepers, chemist clerks, and newspaper men.
They were all part of it, you see. Romantics, socialists, tried or untried revolutionaries, and ordinary people. All dreaming their own dreams of that nation once again.
As Yeats said in his poem, Easter 1916.
I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head or polite, meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite, meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I would live where motley is worn. All changed utterly.
For little more than a week before the rising, there was tremendous excitement. Holy Saturday evening came, the air was electric. All volunteer officers suspected Easter manoeuvres arranged for the next day were really the day. But on Easter Sunday morning, the newspapers carried Owen MacNeill's notice.
Volunteers, completely deceived. All orders for Sunday, cancelled.
Some wondered if he was a coward, but events in the previous days between those for and those against an immediate rising had become quite intense and very confused.
Said one volunteer, the Scotswoman, Margaret Skinner.
Nobody who knew MacNeill could doubt his loyalty to Ireland. It was his love for the volunteers, the love of a man instinctively pacifist, that made him give that order. He feared a very grave catastrophe.
That same Easter night, Connolly, Pearse, and other leaders decided to carry on.
Conley said to Maeve Kavanagh of the Citizen Army, he called her the poetess of the revolution.
We fight at noon tomorrow, and MacNeill's lot can do as they like.
What time will I come down in the morning, son?
Come down at 8 o'clock.
As early as that?
You'd think that too early for a revolution.
For of course they knew what faced them. As the O'Reilly said to Countess Markovich,
It's madness, but it's glorious madness.
more realistic was the remark of one volunteer officer.
We're gone out to be slaughtered.
But Pearse was ready. He knew what he was doing, had always known.
Sacrifice, you see, that was it. Sacrifice.
I blinded my eyes and my ears I shut. I hardened my heart and my love I quenched.
I turned my back on the dream I had shaped. To this road before me, my face I turned.
I set my face to the road here before me.
To the work I see, to the death I shall meet.
So, as the big clock of history kept ticking, Easter Sunday turned into Monday, April the 24th. Easter Monday, 1916.
That morning, as Pearse bade farewell to his mother and headed from St. Inda's into the city, she says to him,
Now, Pat, above all, do nothing rash.
No, mother, I won't.
Oh, God, I hope not.
Hearts with one purpose alone through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart.
And maybe that's true too, though it would be hard to say the rebels were stony-hearted. They responded in any case, and out they went, like this one.
I was in bed when told. I threshed while my father and mother got out my rifle and some sandwiches. I will always remember my father as I saw him that morning. He worked the bolt of the rifle, sighted it, and fired imaginary shots. As he handed the rifle to me, he remarked, if I was a few years younger, I'd go with you myself. Then, mother and father wished God's blessing on me as I hurried away.
We formed up in a procession and moved along the quays, and me feeling as if I were walking on air. An old working man cheers as we went by.
Hooray for the volunteers, hammering the shite out of them.
Walking on air. I suppose it was a sort of enchanted rapture they were in the grip of, wasn't it? Some indeed felt they were taking part in a great romantic drama.
Like we said, dreams and dreamers. But one way or another, for one reason or another, here they were, doing their bit for Ireland.
Youngsters, so many of them. Most between 19 and 25. Even the leaders were young.
Tom Clark was 58, and he the old man of them.
On they marched so, with the big, unstoppable clock of history beating out time for them.
Pearse.
Over 6 feet tall, upright, stern, eager-eyed, visionary.
Connolly.
A squat figure, impeccable uniform, polished leggings.
Joseph Mary Plunkett.
Emaciated, throat enveloped in bandages, hands glittering with rings.
Old Tom Clark.
A spare grey man,
Sean McDermott.
leaning on his cane.
Major John McBride.
Dapper in a blue suit, carrying a cane, smoking a cigar.
And all the volunteers, citizen army and others, with their rifles, shotguns, picks and spades, homemade pikes.
In marching order so, they walked on air until I got to Sackville Street at noon and heard the command.
Left turn, charge, take the
I
GPO.
remember there was a pause, then one volunteer gave a whoop of delight.
Jesus, something was actually going to happen.
Some indeed thought it was a joke.
But it was no joke. The rising was on, history was being made.
Other units arrived, they dashed in a beeline across the emptiness of Sackville
The
Street.
windows of the GPO loomed suddenly before
I
them.
hear someone shout.
Break the windows, you bloody fools!
Someone's rifle splinters, wood and glass, cut and bleeding, we scramble in.
Glass crashes, locks are blown in, windows barricaded with sacks, sandbags, boards, books, typewriters.
Things speed up, it's all a bit of a blur. But we're in, God knows.
There's a lull. We catch our breath. Then Commander Pearce goes out and stands in front of the GPO, while our flag, the tricolour, is raised above the building.
Pierced and read and pinned up the proclamation. We all heard it.
Irish men and Irish women in the name of God and of the dead generations.
Ireland through us summons her children to her flag.
And strikes for her freedom.
Religious and civil liberties, equal rights, equal opportunities.
Cherish all the children of the nation equally.
Under the protection of the Most High God.
And the readiness of its children to sacrifice themselves.
For the common good.
And so on. But, as one bystander noted,
very pale, Pierce was, I remember, cold of face. He scanned the small, almost indifferent-seeming crowd that had gathered, but warmed only to show positive hostility. A few thin, perfunctory cheers, no enthusiasm whatever.
The English authorities responded with a proclamation of their own.
An attempt instigated and designed by the foreign enemies of our king and country to incite rebellion in Ireland and thus endanger the safety of the United Kingdom has been made by a small, though reckless body of men who have been guilty of insurrectionary acts. Therefore, the City of Dublin and the County of Dublin are under and subject to martial law, and I do hereby call on all loyal subjects of the Crown to aid in upholding and maintaining the peace of the Crown and the supremacy and authority of the Crown. God save the King.
And so on. So there you are, history in action. By Tuesday, the Irish Times took notice.
Yesterday morning a rising took place in the City of Dublin. The authorities have taken active and energetic measures to cope with this situation. These measures are proceeding favourably. In according with this official statement, early and prompt action is anticipated.
And ordinary Dubliners, what do they think?
Well, this has taken everyone by surprise. Today our peaceful city is no longer peaceful.
Guns are rolling and cracking from different directions, and the rattle of machine guns can be heard.
I spoke to a man with a revolver near Stephen's Green. No more than a boy, not more than 20 years of age, short in stature, with close curling red hair and blue eyes. A kindly looking lad. His face was sunburnt and grimy with dust and sweat. I asked him what had happened.
We've taken the city, and we are expecting an attack from the military at any moment. And those people won't go home from me. We've all the city. We've everything. This morning the police rushed us. One ran at me to try to take my revolver. I fired, but I missed him, and I hit
He trailed off and I walked away. Glancing back I could see he was staring after me, but I know he did not see me. He was looking at blood and turmoil, and at figures that ran towards him and ran away. A world in motion, and he in the centre of it, astonished.
Countess Markievicz was standing by Stephen's Green, observed by one of her lieutenants, the Scot, Margaret Skinner.
I saw the British soldiers coming up Harcourt Street. The Countess stood motionless, waiting in her officer's uniform with its black hat and great plumes. At length she raised her gun to her shoulder. Shots rang out, and I saw the two officers leading a column drop to the street. As the Countess was taking aim again, that the soldiers, without firing a shot, turned and ran in great confusion from a woman. Of course, later she shot a policeman.
A little later, Margaret Skinner herself was in the thick of the action.
As I rode along on my bicycle, I had my first taste of street fighting. Soldiers on top of the Shelburne aimed their machine gun directly at me. Bullets struck the wooden rim of my bicycle wheel, puncturing it. I rode as fast as I could. My speed saved my life, and soon I was out of range around the corner. Now, whenever I was called down to carry a dispatch, I took off my uniform and put on my grey dress and hat. I went out of the side door of the College of Surgeons with my message. As soon as I returned, I slipped back into my uniform and joined the firing squad.
You know, of course, Monday was the bank holiday. Not too many about. All off at the Fairy House races. Soldiers too. As the week wore on, it was different. Crowds gathered. Like a play it was. So these citizens thought.
I saw an inquisitive crowd in Dolea Street and on O'Connell Bridge, right between the two firing parties. They appeared quite unconcerned. Indeed, one would think from their appearance that the whole thing was merely a sham battle got up for their amusement.
I saw boys playing in the middle of the road with cricket bats and balls. There was no use in warning of danger. Bullets were whining. But they didn't seem to mind.
I saw a group of old women sitting on chairs on the street near Stephen's Green. They said they had come out to see the battle, as if it was all a play.
Maybe in a way that's just what it was. A play. A deadly serious play. Did Michael Collins himself say it was like a Greek tragedy? It had its comic side too. Didn't some of the young volunteers make a raid on the Waxworks Museum and came back wearing things like the costume of Queen Elizabeth I? Swear to God, young lads, and one of them an American.
A play so packed with, well, symbols. Easter, you see, sacrifice, death, resurrection, Pierce's idea.
But in truth, real life too, and real death, whatever about resurrection.
And don't forget real hostility, at what the rebels were doing to the city, the rebels and the British Army. People didn't like it.
Pure foolishness, they'd say.
Toy soldiers with pikes and rifles on one side, they'd say, big guns on the other.
And riots. Of course there were riots. Riots and lootings. No stopping them once they started.
The separation women, as they were called, made the most indelible impression.
Wives and mothers they were. Of Irishmen off fighting in Europe. Very poor they were, living in terrible slum conditions.
Their pensions were held up, you see. It was a disaster for them. They knew they'd go hungry, so naturally they hated the rebels.
Jesus, they attacked us. We were on bicycles. They pulled us off. We had to use the butts of our rifles on them. One big fat woman in white apron and flapping shawl leapt in front of us, beating our huge bosom with clenched fists and near grabbing my bayonet.
So it threw me now. My son is out in France.
Booming and jeering and shouting at us, and the children looting the sweet shop, setting off firecrackers. Chaos. The women around the comb were like the furies of the French Revolution, shoeless, hatless, filthy faces, shouting, shrieking, yelling at us.
Indeed they were, breaking into the shop, smashing the windows, battering down the doors and whipping away everything. And the volunteers was firing on them. I seen two men and a lassie pushing a piano down the street, and the sweat rolling off and trying to get it up into a pavement. And an old one that must have been 70, looking as she'd drop every minute with a dint of heart beating, trying to pull a big double bed out of a shop window. And out there in France there's the men like me own son, marching out into the dread dimness of danger, while the lice is crawling around feeding on the fat of the land. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go.
Indeed, most of the women, well dressed or in shawls and rags, seemed hostile.
I hope every man of them will be shot. They'll be all shot and be done for soon.
But whatever but being shot. They lasted, so they did, longer than most people, even themselves, expected.
Lasting was the point, wasn't it? Putting up a good fight, not toy soldiers.
Dead and wounded all round the place, outside the post office and inside too.
Soldiers, civilians, volunteers, children. Sacrifice, you see.
Sacrifice, just like Pierce had said, and the old Fenian Tom Clark himself had said.
At all periods in the history of Ireland, the shedding of blood has always succeeded in raising the morale and spirit of the people. Our only chance is to make ourselves felt by an armed rebellion. Of course, we shall all be wiped out.
Sacrifice. That was it. No avoiding it. Oh, the little black rose. The Roisin Duff was red at last, just as Joseph Mary Plunkett said it would be.
We shall not fear the trumpets and the noise of battle, for we know our dreams divine. And when at last the blood o'erleaps the final barrier, praise God if this my blood fulfills the doom, when you, dark rose, shall redden into blue.
True enough, I suppose. But history's clock kept ticking, and though they lasted longer than most people thought possible, the end came soon enough.
Though not before they'd seen a good deal.
Decomposing corpses were scattered round the city by week's end. I saw several dead bodies lying in the middle of the street in the brilliant sun. too had sacks over them.
And it wasn't just their own either. They had reminders too of the Great War raging out in the big world.
In one press in the GPO, didn't they find the blood-stained British Army uniform of the Post Office Secretary's son?
He'd been killed a little before in France, you see. In an envelope they found a lock of his fair hair, marked by the boy's mother.
Maybe reminding them that among the English soldiers firing at them were many Irishmen, killing or being killed by their own countrymen.
Yes, like Bill Mulroney, Kildare man and GA man in the King's Hussars. Shot dead outside the GPO, and not the only one.
Such a tangle when you look at it. And as for those inside the GPO itself, they knew hunger, so they did.
Indeed they did. Bitter hunger, thirst too.
By Tuesday, the food had run out. We had nice strong tea, but in a bucket used for Jay's fluid. By Friday I was exhausted, and all I could get to eat was a raw egg and a square of Chivers jelly.
Fear too. How could they not feel it?
Some of our lads began to cry when they heard shots, because they were a long time from confession. But hearing Pierce praise us and knowing my name would live in history, I felt elated. Pierce stood very solemn then, and we looking at him, his right hand on his breast.
There wasn't there rumours all over the place? Combing his rosary beads round the necks of the volunteers.
Volunteers marching in from the country. 2 German warships docked in Dublin Bay.
Plenty of priests was part of it all too, you know. A priest in the Pro Cathedral tried to stop me from going to the GPO.
You're not going. Let those people be burned to death. They're murderers.
But it was different kinds of priests too. In the middle of the fighting with the bullets flying and the roads strewn with the dead and the dying, didn't Father Wall of Haddington Road come along on his bicycle? I could see he was frightened, but he left his bike against a railing and went from one body to another, giving him the last sacrament.
By Friday, the GPO was on fire. Nothing could be done. The noise of the incendiary bombs exploding was terrific, with the bursting glass of the big windows and the falling walls.
The heat was wicked awful. In my simplicity, I picked up the phone to call the fire brigade. They said they intended to let us burn out.
I could see the whole place was a mass of flames, an inferno. Not a soul was now to be seen, only a huge wall of flames.
By Friday morning we were well ablaze. The noise of bursting shells and tumbling walls and roofs was indescribable.
When the roof finally collapsed, pieces of burning timber began to fall from the ceiling on top of us. I thought we were going to stay in the building till we died.
The evacuation began at 8 in the evening. Pierce praised us before we left.
Though we've lost the fight, he said, be assured you will find victory, though that victory may be found in death.
I'm glad we fought, he said. We seem to have lost. We haven't lost. To refuse to fight would be to lose. To fight is to win. He said that.
We've kept faith with the past, he said, and handed on a tradition to the future.
I am satisfied we've saved Ireland's honour. He said that.
Honour. Ah, fair enough. Honour. But it was Desmond Ryan, wasn't it, who saw Pierce in a different mood altogether?
I did. Sitting on a barrel, staring at the flames, his slightly flushed face crowned by his upturned hat. Suddenly, he turned to me with a question.
It was the right thing to do, wasn't it?
Yes.
If we fail, it means the end of everything. Volunteers and all.
Yes.
When we're all wiped out, people will blame us for everything.
I suppose so.
But for this, the war would have ended and nothing would have been done. In a few years, people will see the meaning in what we tried to do.
They can never despise us again.
Well, I suppose that's true too. No doubt about it. Very human. Still, fair name or not, by now, Dublin city was in tatters.
Yes, it was devastated. The centre was in ruins.
By now, the dream was a nightmare.
The finest part of our city's been blown to smithereens and burnt to ashes. The English soldiers say the ruins of this quarter's worse than anything they've seen at Ypres or France or Flanders. And it's a gruesome sight, so it is, to see the dead piled on top of each other in the morgues, and not enough marble slabs to put the bodies on.
The doctors were operating day and night. Neither gas nor electricity, so they had to operate by the lighted candles. No sterilisation of instruments or dressings. No boiling water. Sad stuff, said one nurse to me.
A badly wounded woman died on Thursday, as did also James Kelly, a schoolboy who was shot through the skull. Another schoolboy, John Healy, aged 14, whose brain was hanging all over his forehead when he was brought in, died on Saturday.
Then, By God, the evacuation was pure hell. On leaving the GPO, I never felt closer to death. The whole place was a bedlam hell of flame and night.
Clark said he wanted to go down with the building. What a glorious last stand, Christ. We sang the soldiers' song to keep our spirits up.
And so the garrison poured out into Henry Street without any semblance of order. No one seemed to have any idea what to do. Nobody seemed to be in
We
charge.
crossed the lane by rushes 3 at a time between bursts of heavy fire.
Bullets like hailstones were hopping off the street.
I put my head down as if I was running in heavy rain and ran as I never ran before and got over Henry Street without a scratch.
I was passed by a young volunteer named Mackin. As he moved past me, he shouted, "Oh my God," and fell in my path. I held him in my arms, but he was dead in a minute, shot through the centre of the forehead. I laid him on the path and said a short prayer.
Rebels lay where they'd fallen. I saw one lying on his back, arms outstretched, blood oozing from his body in a pool under him and flies buzzing about his head. 2 or 3 others lay dead near him.
With the wounded Connolly then, Commander Pearce got us safe to a house in Henry Place off Moore Street. There he saw 2 dead civilians, a father and daughter, and 3 dead bodies on the path outside. I saw one poor man with a white flag grasped in his hand, lying dead on the doorstep of his house.
I felt sorry I did for the people living in those houses on Moore Street in Henry Place. When Pearce came and saw what happened to that family, he was like stricken. I could see that.
Christ, what in God's name could he expect? And says he to the mother, trying to comfort her, "My God, I'm sorry this happened. What can we do?" He said that.
In that moment, I suppose, the true horrors of the rising were at last brought home to him. And he said to someone,
They're shooting women and children in the streets. I saw them myself.
beyond all the heroics of the takeover soul, beyond all the fighting, beyond all the delirium of the brave, he knew what he had to do.
In order to prevent the further slaughter of Dublin citizens, and in the hope of saving the lives of our followers now hopelessly outnumbered, the members of the provisional government present at headquarters have agreed to an unconditional surrender, and the commandants of the various districts in the city and country will order their commands to lay down arms.
When I heard of negotiations, the relief was like an answer to prayer. To say I was glad and thankful to God would be putting it mildly. It was a friend of mine, Nurse Elizabeth O'Farrell, who risked her life carrying the surrender notice to General Maxwell and the no conditions back to Pearce. Terrified she was, but brave, very brave.
And so to surrender. Unconditional surrender. And the defeated rebels laying down arms.
At all outposts, men and women were weeping freely, some breaking their rifles against the walls.
Then, after the laying down of arms, the long walk to the surrender points. There were jeers and jeers, yes, but others too, like these.
Good Lord, it's a sight I shall never forget. That thin line, some in the green uniform of the volunteers, others in the plain equipment of the citizen army. Some looking like ordinary civilians, others looking mere lads of 15, not a few wounded and bandaged, and the whole melancholy procession wending its way through the long line of khaki soldiers, and some jeering onlookers.
But downhearted, no. Dockers, labourers, shop assistants, all conditions of men, all of that same look of defiance which will haunt me to my dying day. But whatever else they were not cowards.
And then the big clock of history simply goes on ticking, onto trials, imprisonments, executions.
Over 90, were at first condemned by the hastily formed military courts. Countess Markovich was among them.
But most, including the Countess, were commuted to life imprisonment.
You've heard of the leaders' deaths already.
They prepared in their own ways. John McBride gave this advice to his fellow prisoners.
Some of you may live to fight again, he said. If you do, take to the open country for it. Avoid a death trap like this.
Pearce wrote a letter to his mother.
We are ready to die, and will die proudly and cheerfully, he said. You must not grieve for this. We preserved Ireland's honour and our own. I will call to you in my heart, he said, at the last moment.
He also wrote a poem imagining her thoughts. Curious, but that's what he did.
Like Yeats's Shan Van Vox she is, the poor old woman.
Like Kathleen Houlihan herself, I suppose.
I do not grudge them, Lord, I do not grudge my 2 strong sons that I have seen go out, to break their strength and die, they and a few, in bloody protest for a glorious thing. They shall be spoken of among their people. The generations shall remember them and call them blessed. But I will speak their names to my own heart in the long nights, the little names that were familiar once round my dead heart.
Thomas MacDonagh wrote to his family.
The one bitterness that death has for me, he said, is the separation it brings from my beloved wife and children. But I have not wept or murmured, he said. I have counted the cost of this, and am ready to pay it.
Plunkett wrote to his fiancée. Darling Grace, he wrote, this is just a little note to say I love you. My actions have been as right as I could see and make them, and I cannot wish them undo.
They were married in his cell, you know, just before his execution.
While James Connolly said to his weeping wife Lily and his daughter Nora,
wasn't it a good life, Lily, he said, and isn't this a good end?
you've heard of the executions already. Even on the enemy they made a lasting impression. One soldier witness said MacDonagh died like a prince. When McBride was offered a blindfold, he said,
I have looked on the muzzles of too many guns in the South African War to fear death. Now, please carry out your sentence.
after the executions of Pearse, MacDonagh and Clark.
One soldier in the firing party said,
And it's sad to think that these 3 brave men who met their deaths so bravely should have been fighting for a cause which proved so useless and which has been the means of so much bloodshed.
like Pearse, Yeats, in his poem,
Had mothers on his mind.
Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. Oh, when may it suffice that is heaven's part, our part, to murmur name upon name as a mother names her child, when sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild. What is it but nightfall? No, no, not night but death. Was it needless death after all?
Not night, but death, indeed.
of course, voices were raised against executions. How could there not be? In Westminster itself, Redmond and Dillon spoke out.
They'd been against the rising, yes, calling it
This insane and wicked attempt to destroy all Ireland's hopes just when they were about to be realised.
They knew it would destroy all hopes of the home rule they'd worked for all their lives,
But still, they made their opposition as Irishmen known.
you are letting loose a river of blood between 2 races which after 300 years of hatred and strife we had nearly succeeded in bringing together.
It is not murderers who are being executed, they said, but insurgents who have fought a good, clean fight, a brave fight, however misguided.
The Irish people will regard these executions with helpless rage, the rage with which you'd watch a stream of blood dripping from under a closed door.
And so history's clock ticks on, past trials, past swift and brutal executions.
Past that of good Sir Roger Casement too, great humanitarian, hanged for treason in Pentonville prison, August 3rd.
But hanged, as he said himself, from the dock for being
No traitor adhering to the king's enemies, but an Irish patriot adhering to his own people.
and then the result of all.
As Yeats foresaw it.
We know their dream, enough to know they dreamed and are dead. And what if excess of love bewildered them till they died? I write it out in a verse, MacDonagh and MacBride, and Connolly and Pearse, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed, changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born.
And that was it. For as if by magic, these same executions and the spreading stories of how the condemned men faced in them
Transformed and utterly both the rising and the rebels.
Requiem masses gathered huge exultant crowds. The leaders in death had greater power over any stripe of nationalist opinion than they ever had in their lives.
War was achieved, people said, by 6 days of fighting and its aftermath than in 25 years of constitutional politics. All changed utterly.
Indeed, and indeed a terrible beauty was born.
When grown men standing in Saxford Street crying their eyes out. And in the poet Ledwidge, before he went back to the trenches where he died,
Write an elegy for the poets among the executed men.
I heard the poor old woman say,
At break of day the Father came, and took my blackbirds from their songs, who loved me well through shame and blame. No more from lovely distances their songs shall bless me mile by mile. And when the first surprise of flight sweet songs excite from the far dawn, shall there come blackbirds loud with love, sweet echoes of the singers gone. But in the lovely hush of eve, weeping, I grieve the silent bills.
I heard the poor old woman say, in Derry of the little hills.
And no doubt you know that the executed men, even the few Protestant among them, some of whom converted at the end, became Catholic martyrs.
The logic of sacrifice, you see, overwhelming everything. And sure, maybe the church itself was laying its claim.
But it was difficult to believe the change we saw. Everywhere, except in Ulster, a new Ireland had been born. After the orgy of blood, we said, Ireland could not be the same. A once familiar world is overwhelmed. As yet, one knows nothing of the future, except it must be very unlike the past.
True enough, as we now know. Still, on hearing the news, did Maud Gonne, who years before had played Kathleen O'Houlihan in Yeats's play, didn't she write to him from France?
I am overwhelmed by the tragedy and the greatness of sacrifice that have been made by our country men and women. I am ill with sorrow. So many of my best and noblest friends gone. They have raised the Irish cause to a position of tragic dignity. Those who die for Ireland are sacred. The deaths of those leaders were full of beauty and romance. They shall be speaking forever. The people shall hear them forever. The poet himself was stricken by it all.
I had no idea that any public event could so deeply move me. I am trying to write a poem on the men executed. Terrible beauty has been born. The leaders shall live while Ireland lives. People we have known with familiarity and regarded with contempt have joined the mythic company of Emmet, Fitzgerald and Tone.
Of course, it was in this mood that he wrote his poem, wasn't it?
Quite so. Easter 1916, with all its ambivalences and its shifts of mind and heart, with its too long a sacrifice will make a stone of the heart, and its for England may keep faith for all that is done and said.
It was a risky poem indeed. People shy from complexity and ambiguity, don't they? It's simplicity they want, isn't it? The simplicity maybe of Pierce's vision of sacrifice.
I suppose that's it, yes. Maud Gonne, for example, now widow of the martyred MacBride, was on the side of sacrifice.
No surprise in that. Of course, Yeats sent her his poem, and she wrote back to him right away from France.
My dear Willie, no, I don't like your poem. It's not worthy of you. Above all, it's not worthy of the subject. You know quite well that sacrifice never yet turned a heart to stone. You can never say that Macdonagh, Pearse and Conley were sterile, fixed minds. Each served Ireland, which was their share of the world, with varied faculties and vivid energy. As for my husband, he has entered eternity through the great door of sacrifice which Christ opened. There are beautiful lines in your poem, but it is not a great whole, a living thing which our race will treasure and repeat.
That was telling him. But since she is Kathleen O'Houlihan after all, so what could he expect?
And then the aftermath.
Yeats sensed what was to come.
He saw that the rational politics of the Home Rule Party might, just might, have restored some trust in the constitutional effort to bring about Home Rule. For England may keep faith, his poem had said, for all that is done and said.
But he knew it could not compete with the great emotional wave rising to support the rebels' cause.
True, and we know what happened then to the parliamentary party of Redmond and Dillon.
Indeed we do. History's clock kept ticking, and in time it brought the party to its knees. People, you see, knew they'd been, like many another indeed, against the rising.
So their protests at the executions didn't matter.
Not a whit. And when conscription in Ireland was announced, even though they opposed it, it sealed their fate.
It was the last straw. Yeats, ever vigilant, knew the score. It seems to me a strangely wanton thing, he said.
That for the sake of 50,000 Irish soldiers, England, he said, is prepared to hollow another trench between our countries and fill it with blood.
And then John Redmond himself, whose own brother Willie was killed fighting in France, died soon after.
Died, it is said, a broken-hearted man. His life's work buried in the rubble of Dublin, washed away by the blood of martyrs.
True. That was sad. Sad to write him out of history too, was it not?
Like Willie Redmond was, and so many other Irishmen, thousands of them, who fought and died in the Great War, fighting as that good man Tom Kettle was, Irish patriot, British soldier, European.
Fighting for a cause they, for whatever reason, adventure, employment, ideology, were committed to.
And wasn't it Willie Redmond himself who said,
"Why must it be," he said, "that with Irish soldiers and British soldiers dying side by side, this eternal quarrel between us should go on?"
Of course, history's clock didn't stop its ticking even then, did it? How could it? It kept on moving, as it has to move, forward, and forward now in a changed Ireland.
Forward to November the 11th, 1918, end of the Great War, and on to December 1918,
United Kingdom elections.
unstoppable history.
Sinn Féin, led by that brave man Arthur Griffith, wins by a landslide in Ireland.
Many of those elected are in jail or on the run.
They form a breakaway legislative body, the Dáil.
They ratify as monuments to the glorious martyrs.
The Rising's declaration of a republic.
And on the 21st of January 1919, they sit as Dáil Éireann in Dublin.
Nationalists then, and not only nationalists, ask each other.
Did you ever think you'd live to see this day, they said? Was the past ever so near, the present so brave, the future so full of hope?
Hope, aye. It wasn't long with the Great War in Europe ended that history brings along another one.
Indeed, the Anglo-Irish
The
War,
War of Independence.
the Black and Tan War,
Guerrilla War, take your pick. Guerrilla War anyway.
assassinations, reprisals, IRA, flying columns,
Auxiliaries, martial law, Black and Tans, Crow Park, Bloody Sunday.
sectarian murders north and south.
Killings, more killings, shootings, hangings.
Over 1,400 dead. Irish police, British soldiers, IRA volunteers.
Statistics again.
And of course, again, as always, civilians, children.
Violence upon the roads, violence of horses. Now days are dragon-ridden, the nightmare rides upon sleep. A drunken soldiery can leave the mother murdered at her door to crawl in her own blood and go scot-free. The night can sweat with terror as before we pieced our thoughts into philosophy and planned to bring the world under a rule who are but weasels fighting in a hole.
On and on so.
On at last to stalemate, ceasefire, talks, a truce.
Yes, a truce. It lasted from July to December 1922. You can imagine the relief. The whole country drawing breath.
And still on marches history. Tramp, tramp, tick-tock, tick-tock, on to a treaty.
Oh, the treaty, the vexatious treaty.
Offers, counter-offers, drafts, agreements, disputes.
But then the North.
The North. The Unionist North. Enough said.
We have given a pledge that if Ulster resists, we will support her in her resistance. We intend to keep that pledge.
Same again, still intact. No treaty would shift it.
So there's De Valera in Dublin waiting results.
Griffith, Collins and their advisors in London making offers.
Offers, counter-offers, back and forth.
Back and forth, until Canny Lloyd George forced the issue.
Sign the treaty as is, or it'll mean the renewal of immediate and terrible war.
It was a use.
No mistaking that.
No mistaking that.
Michael Collins said it was the best they could get from Britain at that time.
It was a useful first step, he said. From here further, freedom can be achieved. Gives us freedom, he said. Not the ultimate freedom that all nations desire, but the freedom to achieve it.
Fast forward so to the 7th of January 1922.
Oh, these dates, these chimes, big and little of history.
The second Dáil, with 121 members, ratifies the treaty by a margin of 7 votes.
So close. Two opposing traditions facing off so.
Constitutional on one side,
Physical force on the other.
going back to long before 1916.
But here and now. It's not just in
Or
debates.
councils or rational
The
discussions.
stakes are higher than ever. It could be war, bloody war, war between
Those who'd been allies in 1916 and through the War of Independence.
Republicans stand firm.
Free staters won't budge.
Militarists versus politicians, you might say.
Lines harden, confusion in plenty, but lines harden.
Positions fixed.
Unbending rhetoric.
No way out.
Resignations.
Walkouts.
Repudiations.
Till it's the 28th of June 1922.
History just won't call a halt.
Will it ever?
The Republicans take over the Four
So
Courts.
Collins bombarded.
And here's another war
But
indeed.
merciful God.
Now it's civil war.
Free staters, irregulars.
Republicans, diehards.
Ambushes, shootouts, killings.
Retaliations, reprisals, executions.
The country split.
Heart's blood leaking out.
Suffering Jesus. near a year of it.
11 blood-drenched months.
Pacts, broken pacts.
Old laws, new laws.
After killings by
The
Republicans.
Free State government.
Executes Republican prisoners.
77 of them, merciful
The
God.
whole country running blood.
Families divided, friends killing each other.
Our own country, men and women.
And so many of the dead, innocent civilians, children, as usual.
No reliable numbers of killed or wounded, maybe 3,000.
Carnage.
Far from the sacrificial dream of Pearse, the socialist dream of Connolly, the romantic dream of MacDonagh, isn't it?
Not the watering of a little rose tree with blood, no.
But the whole country drenched in it.
It was nothing but a blood-saturated ground.
And you'd ask yourself, who the hell is who? What's being fought for?
Not Pearse's simple blood sacrifice, was it?
No. For what would Pearse have done in all of this? This tangle?
Our own internecine bloodletting.
Mellows,
Collins,
O'Connor,
O'Higgins,
Cahill Brewer, Erskine
and
Children,
hundreds, maybe thousands of
the
others.
mound of dead growing higher by the day.
Atrocities,
No shortage.
ambushes aplenty,
House burnings, abductions, maimings.
sectarian murders north and south.
And in the midst of all of this, what could you do but pray?
As the poet Yeats in his tower.
The bees build in the crevices of loosening masonry, and there the mother bird brings grubs and flies. My wall is loosening. Honey bees, come build in the empty house of the stair. We are closed in, and the key is turned on our uncertainty. Somewhere a man is killed or a house burned, yet no clear fact to be discerned. Come, build in the empty house of the stair. A barricade of stone or of wood, some 14 days of civil war. Last night they trundled down the road that dead young soldier in his blood. Come, build in the empty house of the stair. We had fed the heart on fantasies, the heart's grown brutal from the fair. More substance in our enmities than in our love. Oh, honeybees, come, build in the empty house of the stair.
So on and on and on. Another sweep of history's bloody hand.
Sweeping on to the 23rd of May, 1923.
And the order coming down from De Valera to his Republican forces.
Further sacrifice on your part would now be in vain, and the continuance of the struggle in arms unwise in the national interest. Military victory must be allowed to rest for the moment with those who have destroyed the Republic.
Sacrifice, there's that word again.
As if it could put the blood back in all those bodies.
History, it happens, has happened, has happened.
Mingled yarn to say the least, and still argued over.
Often in a clamorous dialogue of the dead.
What if, what if, what if?
And what if excess of love?
Bewilder them till they die.
How history teases us with its what ifs.
And what would Pearse have done had he survived?
Or MacDonagh or Connolly or any of them.
Visionaries, I suppose, dreamers and others, poets.
But wasn't it Pearse himself who said during the planning of the rising,
Well, if we do nothing else, we will rid Ireland of 3 bad poets.
yes, good to know he had a sense of humour too.
But God knows, were they all as pure and innocent as MacDonagh's poem makes it sound?
His songs were a little phrase of eternal song. His deed was a single word called out alone in a night when no echo stirred to laughter or moan.
Poems. But what if the executions hadn't happened? Would any of this have been averted?
Still no end to the what-ifs of history.
And we'll never, no matter all our hindsights, we'll never know, will we?
And who's to blame? Or is it any use asking?
Blame is it? Don't make me laugh. I remember a wise man said to me once, it seems, says he, history is to blame.
True enough. But I suppose we must say it all started for better, for worse.
The GPO in Kilmainham Yard at Easter 1916 and went on year by tumultuous year.
Through 1922 and 1923 and the Irish Free State.
Near 7 years, so 7 bloody years to the end of it. And in truth, of course, no through into it.
A country's long enduring birth
It's
pangs.
a hard service they take that helped me, said Kathleen O'Hulan. Oh, you could sing that, no lie. And history didn't give her the lie either.
Of course it didn't stop there. We all know that.
Through the 20s and after.
Shootings and killings by die-hard Republicans.
Executions by the Free State government.
All our yesterdays.
And some of our todays too.
In a different yet same key of truth.
Oh, honeybees, come build in the empty house of the stair.
But can there be any end to it at all, I wonder? To all that history?
I suppose not. Still, we're here, aren't we?
True. And now we have our 32nd Dáil, democratically elected.
A bit of a mess. Health, housing, homelessness, hunger.
Yes, and all full of fiery words and angry words and silly words and this party and that party.
God knows what party. But what matter? It's there.
Yes, with the hope of it. And is that not history too?
No question. The winding, rocky road of it.
But do you perhaps remember the little penny copybooks we had at school years ago?
Indeed I do. The ones with a little bit of history, dates and the like on the back cover. 1014, 1170, 1798, 1829, 1916.
1919 and 1922 and 1923 and so on.
All there. History.
And you know, I always remember feeling as a child, feeling good, when I saw the date 1949 and next to it a simple phrase, the Republic of Ireland.
And now look at us. Proud Europeans as we are, remembering 1916.
Yes, but remembering the sum too, our shared history.
But you're right, there it was, the Republic of Ireland.
There it was,
Yes.
no fanfare, just a little penny copybook, the Republic of Ireland.
That was it. That was us. History indeed.
Coming all the crooked way down from that Easter, I suppose.
Though of course, we're still a divided island, aren't we?
Yes, we are, and that is indeed a pity. Oh dear, it is all so deeply complicated.
Complicated. Well, it is surely. You just have to live with it.
Yes, we just have to live with it.
Well, I suppose that's it so. That's our story.
And as good a place as any to end, just where we are, in the present moment.
Some call me the poor old woman, and there are some that call me Cathy, the daughter of Bohol. There have been many songs made for me. I heard one